The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.
We now move to the formal program of today, and I have the great pleasure in introducing Professor Shilitsi Marwala, the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg. He serves as an inspiration to all of us each day through his writings, through his leadership at the university. Very recently, he wrote, "Will South Africa crumble because of our internal weaknesses or because of pressures from outside? Does South Africa have a beautiful mass of beautiful ones to prevent it from collapsing?" This is from the Ghanaian author Arma. Professor Marwala, prior to becoming the Vice Chancellor, was our Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Internationalization. Prior to that, the Executive Dean of Engineering and the Built Environment. He has taken a lead in writing about artificial intelligence, the reality of the fourth industrial revolution, which is here with us to stay. It is not an event, it is a reality, and we are living in it. He has 5 patents, 23 books on AI, is an accomplished rated scholar with multidisciplinary research interests that include the theory and application of AI to engineering, computer science, finance, social science, and medicine. Most notably, he has done extensive research on missing data and its applications to the condition monitoring of structures, the application of AI in health to detect pulmonary embolisms and epileptic activity, and the use of AI to predict interstate conflict and the impact of AI on economics. More recently, he's been writing quite extensively on South Africa and where we are heading to. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our Vice Chancellor, who is an inspiration to all of us and who will set the tone for our Future Professors program. Thank you very much, Professor Marwala. We will accord you 30 minutes, and then we will go to questions and answers from our 29 FPP participants who are from 26 universities across our country. And I thought that the beautiful ones are yet to be born is such an apt description for the future professors and the participants in this program. Over to you, Professor Marwala.
Thank you very much, Dr. Menon, for that introduction. And obviously, I would like to thank everybody who has taken time to come and actually engage the future professors who in many ways are an inspiration to all of us. Just 2 years ago, we were still largely discussing the fourth industrial revolution in the abstract. Although there had already been a shift towards embracing digital technologies, the 4IR was often dismissed as mere rhetoric that spoke to an uncertain and long-off future. Yet the pandemic and the lockdowns that has necessitated around the world have confirmed that we are indeed in the midst of the 4IR. In January 2016, Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, introduced the term in an article as a prelude to that year's World Economic Forum meetings. He asserted at the time, and I am going to quote, "We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. We do not yet know just how it will unfold, but one thing is clear: the response to it must be integrated and comprehensive, involving all stakeholders of the global polity, from the public and private sectors to academia and civil society." Close quote. 5 years on from this statement, and it is apparent that we are no longer on the brink of this revolution, but rather in the midst of it. Put quite simply, the 4IR emphasizes advances in communication and connectivity through smart technology based on robotics, algorithms, chatbots, to data analytics. The 4IR blurs the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres through artificial intelligence, automation, biotechnology, nanotechnology, and communication technologies. The 4IR is largely driven by AI, a technology that makes machines intelligent. A machine is considered to be intelligent if it can analyze information and extract insights beyond the obvious. This, of course, is a background in which our future professors are going to prepare themselves to become those professors who are rated, who are worldly, and who understand the very essence of doing research and teaching in the 21st century. In other words, you are going to be honing your skills in an era where machines are mimicking human thinking, and in many instances are surpassing human thinking. Not too long ago, Springer actually published a book, the first book that was entirely written by an artificial intelligence machine. Entirely. I read that book. And of course, when you read the book, you can't really tell whether it was written by a human being or it was written by a machine. Now, given all these developments, how do we use machines so that we can be able to tackle some of the biggest problems that are confronting our planet? The problems of climate change, the problems of inequality, the problems of massification of education, and at the same time, the changes that are going to accompany education. While computers traditionally relied on people to tell them what to do and how to react, AI is based on machines that are able to learn and make their own decisions. Therefore, AI differs from preceding industrial revolutions in that it is not only about the proliferation of new technology that restructures work and allows machines to surpass human effort. It is also about how enhanced information storage, processing, and integration capacity affects work, daily life, and intellectual development. Information and data are the building blocks of this new period in human history where technology is currently developing at a faster rate than we are able to fully grasp and harness. In fact, many people say that data is the new oil. And as you embark on your career, you have to bear in mind that the data that you gather is actually a much more of a wealth than it has ever been. And in many ways, there will be many people who would like to monetize that. In the year 2017, my colleague, Professor Bo Xing, and I published an article entitled Implications of the Fourth Industrial Age for Higher Education in the Thinker. As we asserted at the time, and I will quote, the connection between education and society is often implied to be a one-way, where education is expected to fit with economic and political trends, rather than opposing them and representing something different. Such general understanding of the relationship between education and socioeconomic structures and what the education position involves help us to form a projection of future higher education which is associated with the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, almost 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, technology has become the driving force in most industries, including education. Though at certain levels, we had adopted technology at our universities prior to the pandemic, March 2020 really proved to be the catalyst that will propel us into a completely digital world. Like much of the rest of the world, Xing and I could not predict that just 3 years after our article was published, we will find ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic. As cases of the coronavirus began to hit closer to home at the start of last year, I once again began to ponder the future of higher education. Had you asked me before the pandemic what I thought the future of higher education would be, I was certain I could accurately predict our trajectory. The reality, as history often proves to be true, was vastly different from anything that could have been theorized. This seems to be a common theme in my life. Growing up in the village of Dutuni in the province of Limpopo, I had grand dreams for a better life, but could have barely imagined the trajectory my life would take. It was when I was in matric that I subverted what many assumed would be my lot in life. I entered and won the National Science Olympiad and was sent to the United Kingdom to attend the London International Youth Science Fortnight. It was there where I was introduced to the so-called topics that were going to define the 21st century. And those such topics included, and one of the biggest technology that became a big disappointment was actually superconductivity. It was going to revolutionize every aspect of our lives. But at the same time, I was also introduced to the idea of artificial intelligence, which at the time sounded like something quite fantastic and belonged only in works of science fiction. It was in a frosty London that I decided that I would spend the rest of my life in science and technology, and that I would study the field of AI, in particular with vigor. Quite coincidentally, all this was happening at Imperial College, which is where I began my academic career. Then, little did I know at the time that this will soon be the path we will all have to embrace. In recent years, conversations around the 4IR have been coupled with debates around higher education. As Schwab, the executive director of the World Economic Forum, wrote in 2019, the fourth industrial revolution is not merely a series of incremental technological advancement. It is an upheaval, a dramatic and wide-ranging shift in the way that value is created, exchanged, and distributed across individuals, organizations, and entire economies, close quote. And because of its multidimensional nature, it is going to require researchers to work in a multidimensional settings. Now we'll talk a little bit about that. If all industries are fundamentally transforming, what does it mean for our own education industry? This is called, it called for a fundamental shift in our approach. As Dr. Penn Place wrote, the societal changes from the 4IR will require higher education to develop greater capacity for ethical and intercultural understanding, placing a premium of liberal arts type of education with modifications to adapt to the particular issues raised by 4IR technologies and their disruptions to society, close quote. Now, if we're to investigate two key economies in the world, the United States and Germany, on the face of it, Germany is a very technologically advanced society. And United States also is technologically advanced, but Germany has traditionally had a reputation for its technological advancements. But if you look at the new economy that involves what is called unicorns, unicorns are companies such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, and so on and so forth, you will realize that there are very few unicorns in Germany compared to the United States. They don't have the German version of Facebook. They don't have the German version of Twitter or Apple and so on and so forth. Why is that the case? My thesis is that the German education, and I discussed this with the German ambassador and he agrees with me. The German education is too specialized. Just like the education that we have here in South Africa, which we inherited from the British, it is too specialized. Whereas the American education actually is very general. I started my university education at the University of Cape Town, but I soon transferred to the United States. So I could quite understand the curriculum of the University of Cape Town, and I could quite compare it with the curriculum in the United States. And I did not change any discipline. I was studying mechanical engineering at the University of Cape Town, and I went and studied mechanical engineering in Ohio. What came as a big shock when I arrived in Ohio was the requirement that I should take social science and humanities. In fact, I was required as an engineer to take 12 human and social sciences. So I ended up taking 6 economy classes, 2 psychology classes. I even took 3 acting classes. I took the history of science and technology and so on and so forth. And later on, when I was working in artificial intelligence, one of the big algorithms in artificial intelligence is an algorithm that is based on reinforcement learning. And I always tell my colleagues in artificial intelligence that I did not learn about reinforcement learning in artificial intelligence. I first learned it in psychology. So this multidisciplinary nature of American educational system is actually what explains why Germany has not been able to get into this new economy that is much, much more multidisciplinary. And the same can be used to explain the lagging behind that you see in the United Kingdom. That was advanced many, many, many years ago. So you are going to have to be the professors who understand and appreciate multidisciplinary thinking and ways of working. It is the new culture of the 4IR era. It is necessitated by the complexity of the problems that we confront today that require it. Those problems require multidisciplinary thinking and ways of doing things. So here, we are living in universities, and universities are critical spaces for learning, and they remain pivotal for the development of society. And one of the things that you will have to hone in your careers is the ability to adapt. The way we adapted to the lockdown, certainly here at the University of Johannesburg, emerging as the first university to complete the academic year in the year of the pandemic, and also the first university to open the academic year in the year after the pandemic, is this concept that the World Economic Forum identified as one of the key critical skills that is needed in the 21st century: the ability to adapt. As Charles Darwin puts it in his book, which I am going to be reading at on the 19th year at the University of Johannesburg for staff and students, and you are more than welcome to join in the conversation at 2 o'clock. It is not the strongest or the fittest that are going to survive, but those that are most adaptable to change. So as professors, you are not professors of constancy. You are professors that should be professors of change. You must change, you must adapt, because the environment is changing so quickly. The tools of doing research are advancing so quickly. Literature reviews are not going to be done by people just walking into libraries. It is going to be done with people who are going to merge the use of machines into their ways of doing work. Those are the eras that have been brought in by the fourth industrial revolution. Now, post-pandemic, as we reset the button and we agree that it has offered us the opportunity to renew our posture. In order for higher education institutions to remain relevant, and in addition of continuing to adapt, we have to learn technology. We have to hone what I call in my book, Leadership in the 21st Century, Fourth Industrial Revolution thinking into all our work. And this, of course, calls for the basis of teaching, learning, and research to be predicated on technology, and not just when presented with extreme circumstances, The National Future Professors Phase 2 programs actually speaks to this endeavor. As Professor Horowitz and Professor Whiteback of the University of Pennsylvania contend, universities' institutional mandate to convene top talent together with incentive structures that reward long-term research and development strengthen their power to effect change, but they can take much better advantage of it. Academia should be a vanguard of the fourth industrial revolution. Universities are centers of gravity, attracting researchers and students. They create a natural groundswell of intellectual capital and knowledge production, close quote. But universities are no longer just bricks and mortar. Collaborations are now facilitated by technology. Use these technologies to expand the reach of your academic activity. Use these technologies enabled by artificial intelligence that I talked about at the beginning of my talk to identify people with similar interests to yours and link them to your group and work with them. Have weekly meetings with people who are not necessarily based in South Africa. Just here in my own research, I have a weekly meeting with researchers from the Middle East and South America and South Africa every week. And we work as if we are in the same space. And it is going to even get better when virtual reality becomes a reality and the cost of it falls down. We are actually going to increasingly expand the very notion of internationalization. One of the things that we are doing here at the University of Johannesburg to connect our students to the rest of the world, in addition to Africa by Bus project, where we take our staff and students to the rest of the African continent, is actually to start having projects that are crafted to include team members who come from different countries and hopefully different time zones, so that we can simulate the international digital environment in which our students are going to work. So the University of Johannesburg is the lead implementer of this Department of Higher Education and Training project, which prepares promising early career academics to become a new cohort of South African professors. The overall purpose of the FPP Phase 2, in line with Dohet policy, is to accelerate readiness of talented and promising early career academics to become a new cohort of effective professors across disciplines to contribute to producing a critical mass of academic excellence and leadership in South African higher education. And I will add, to take our higher education spaces into the fourth industrial revolution era. The FPP Phase 2 involves an innovative approach to growing a representative professorate through the implementation of a coherent, structured, effectively supported program. The program aims to contribute to the need for a critical mass of academic excellence and leadership in South African higher education institutions. The university intends to adopt a holistic development approach in this program in terms of personal, academic, and professional development. Each participant will be assigned a dedicated mentor and personal coach. Mentoring and coaching have been shown in other UJ programs to provide significant and positive outcomes. Elements of the FPP Phase 2 program include applying for the National Research Foundation rating, research grants, enhancing research capacity, mentoring, coaching, personal development, and other dimensions required for eligibility to full professorship. One of the things that you should always bear in mind is that there is money outside our science councils. So when you think of grants, you have to think beyond the National Research Foundation or the Medical Research Council or the Agricultural Research Council. You have to also think about what is happening in companies, at Google, for example. And sometimes we'll think that at Google it is about technology. It is not really just about technology. It's about ethics. It is about society, the impact of technology in society. It's really about education in its totality, human, social, technological, and so on and so forth. In a journal article for the Council of Higher Education earlier this year, I argued, and I quote myself, we need to reflect on what we research and what are the spin-off benefits of our society. We do not have time on our side. We cannot remain still and unchanged despite the swelling sea of change. That goes against the very laws of physics, close quote. This, I would argue, is exactly what the FPP has achieved. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus of Ephesus reminds us, the only constant in life is change. This encompasses the very nature of the FPP. It is a great honor for the University of Johannesburg to be the lead implementer of this program, which speaks to the broader national research agenda. As my Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Sorapsina, so eloquently put it, given that higher education is not static, the future professorate must be prepared to continuously evolve to sustain the kind of scholarship that is dedicated not only to the renewal of the academic profession, but ultimately to the renewal of our society. Close quote, ngiyabonga, bayadanki, kiyalibuwa, ndiyalibuwa, nakenza, enkosi. Thank you.
Sure, Professor Marwala, you're leaving us a bit speechless. And we are so inspired by your description. And we're going to have to live up to that to become professors of change. Thank you very much for inspiring us and setting the tone for our 2 days of engagement. And I have promised all our participants that our university is waiting for some semblance of normalcy before we can introduce them to our wonderful campuses and maybe to spot our robot dog. And I now open the floor to questions. Please put your hands up and I will pick up your name.
Prof. Carl has a hand up.
Professor Carl, Dr. Carl.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Prof. Marwala, for the inspiring talk. I would like to find out what your thoughts are in terms of advocating for us to be professors of change, in terms of the current landscape of universities where the mandate is publish or perish, and the drive for promotions and rating is stick to your field. What are you specializing in? And there's so much focus on a linear trajectory for the ratings. Now, where do you see change and the multi and interdisciplinarity playing out in that arena that we are living in within the South African teaching and learning landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that difficult question. I actually think multidisciplinary thinking is actually a reality that we have to pursue. Because ultimately what we are doing is, of course, ratings are important. Of course, all these factors are important, but the ultimate goal of what we do is to create knowledge that will hopefully change society. And it is pretty clear that the scale and the scope of the problems that we face are just simply multidisciplinary. I'll give an example, the COVID-19 pandemic. On the face of it, it actually sounds like it is a scientific issue. It's the issue of finding vaccines. And then we went and found vaccines. Then we realized that no, that is not all. There was huge amounts of work that ought to have been done by social scientists to basically foretell the vaccine hesitancy that we are experiencing today. It's also about governance, as we saw what happened in the PPE rollout, especially in Gauteng. So the problems are actually the goal. Our goal as researchers ultimately is to solve problems. I mean, I think we should never lose sight of that. In solving those problems, if the problems are good and they're important enough, then papers are going to emerge. And then I will also add to another mandate of a university that is not just publishing papers, it's also creating IP. We very often here at the University of Johannesburg encourage our staff and students to also consider patenting their ideas before they publish, so that we can be able to pursue also the value chain of commercializing activities that are happening at the university or at our universities. So now, going back to your specific question, what is to be done by the National Research Foundation, given the complexities of the problems that confront us? I think the National Research Foundation must actually put it very, very clearly to whoever is going to review the ratings, for example, and even the grants, that multidisciplinary research is here, and therefore it should be encouraged rather than to be penalized. Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions?
Marty has a hand up, Kirti. There's two,
Okay.
we have two hands.
Thank you so much, Professor. I'm Marty from the University of Victoria and proudly a former UJ postdoc. I wanted to ask you, as future professors of change, what is professors' advice on how to conduct transformative and contextual research, which is really of value both nationally and internationally, because it's often, difficult when we find ourselves in our silos to see how we can transform, for example, legal research to be both transformative and contextual and contribute both to the knowledge gap in the global south and globally. So I would love to get some tips from you on that, if you don't mind. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
No, absolutely. I actually think that one of the biggest dangers of academia, and I speak here as an engineer, is the danger of solving the problems that we can solve. You know, and it is a big danger, by the way. For example, in engineering, you make all sorts of assumptions in order to simplify the problem that you are solving, and put it compactly in mathematical format. And very often you lose sight of what is the objective of what you are doing. And because of that mindset, you very often find that we don't come up with as many solutions as somebody who is from industry, whom the solution to a problem becomes very, very important. Now, to answer your question directly, I think firstly, solve the real problems. Solve the real problems, no matter how complex they may be. And if they are complex enough, there will always be a scope to publish. So never lose sight of the problems you are actually trying to solve. And then the second advice that I would give is that be active in an environment where the problems that you are interested in emanate. If you are an engineer, mechanical engineer, spend as much time as possible at BMW factories, for example. If you are in sociology, spend as much time in our communities. Very, very important. If you are in the legal profession, spend as much time with people who can actually be able to come up with the problems that are confronting you. Thank you very much.
Prof, we have another question. I'm just looking for the name of the person. Would you like to speak? Megan, who is it?
Vuyana.
Vuyana? Would you like to speak?
You are muted.
Oh, thank you. I was on mute. Thank you very much, Prof, for a wonderful presentation. I'm Dr. Mvuyana from Mangosuthu University of Technology. In your presentation, you've raised a lot of issues, interesting issues that we find ourselves during the times of the pandemic and post. I like the fact that you've raised the issue of a multidisciplinary way of thinking. And this is the space where we are now finding ourselves. I just want to give you an example. I'm working on a paper. It's on teaching and learning. It's around blended learning. I'm from the Department of Public Administration, so it means I'm an administrator. And then I'm working on something on teaching and learning. And then in my mind, there's something that said to me, yes, in as much as the focus is on how can we improve teaching and learning during the times of the pandemic, but there's this other element of bringing in public administration where you need to talk about the issues of inequality. We've got the SDGs, where countries committed in achieving them by 2030. But the infrastructure for some of the institutions is, even if it's not there, but it's not enough to give them or to allow them to be fully fledged institutions that use blended learning. So for me, what you are raising here is very important. And it says, as academics, we need to move out of where we are, and then collaborate with other academics in other disciplines so as to find solutions in the problems that we are facing. For instance, you spoke about the issue of PPEs. That's procurement. But what the focus at the time was to make sure that the PPEs are provided to everyone so that people are protected. But because of the weakness of the system in the procurement space, then it led us to where we are as a country. So, Prof, for me, it's just a comment where you're saying, let us think out of the box now. There's a lot that we can do out there and then bring solutions as academics, because in as much as there's this emphasis of saying we must publish, but I think it's the time we bring solutions. Yes, we've been publishing for years, and then and there hasn't been any if there's been any improvements, but I think for me it's the time where we need to showcase what we can do as academics in order to make sure that we live in a better space. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Mbuyana, for that very important intervention.
Right. Are there any further questions? Megan, any other hands?
One more hand. Zaid, two more hands. So Zaid and Sinead.
So shall we go Zaid first?
And then
this is Zaid Waqid. Then there's Sinead.
And then Jeremiah Safadi.
And Jeremiah Safadi. Zaid, do you want to go first?
Thank you for that, Kirti. Thank you, Professor, for your inspiring and excellent presentation. I think you propose valuable and necessary strategies towards advancing 4IR in universities. Now, one could argue that the push towards 4IR is also linked to a particular capitalist agenda that has economic, political, and social implications. And considering that calls for universities in South Africa towards decolonizing teaching and learning practices, research, and even community engagement, do you see any form of controversy between some of the aims of decolonizing universities and the push towards 4IR?
No, thank you very much, Zaid, for that difficult question. Well, in my view, I don't think these are matters that are contradictory to one another. I believe that any technology can be used by anybody for any political agenda. For example, if you look at 4IR, the capitalists have used it to usher what is now termed hypercapitalism that is resulting in huge inequalities. At the same time, we know that the repressive states have used the same 4IR to pursue their agenda of staying in power and controlling people. So like any piece of technology, we have to shape it. We have to regulate it. We have to understand its excesses. We have to develop strategies on how we are going to tackle those excesses. But it is quite clear, and it has always been clear even in the past, that any society that ignores a vital technological development is doing itself a disservice. Whether it was the development of penicillin, whether it was the development of any technology that you can think of, any society that ignores it is going to fall behind. But at the same time, Our eyes must be wide open. Coming to the issue of decolonization, I think we need to decolonize fourth industrial revolution. We know that there is no isiZulu version of Siri. It doesn't exist. The language is excluded from that piece of technology. Our task towards decolonizing that piece of technology is actually to participate and bring along our beautiful languages in South Africa and in Africa, such as isiZulu, into the technological era. So, and many issues that we are thinking about, you know. Some people are saying that the fourth industrial revolution is ushering in an era of techno-feudalism. Now we're talking about pre-French industrial revolution type of feudalism. The question that we ought to do as universities is that what mechanisms do we need to put into place to prevent that techno-feudalism from taking hold in our own society? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Sinead.
Hi, Prof. Marwala. Thank you so much for being here today. I agree with you very much about multidisciplinarity. I think that it's necessary, especially with regards to new technologies, for positive but also critical voices in the space. But this is actually not a question about the content of your study. I hope you will allow me. It's more about, I have very many things that I'm interested in. I would like to read up more about the confluence of the humanities and quantum physics, for example. But I don't have time, and I just wanted to know from you, what do you do in your day, in your week, that allows you to manage all of your administrative responsibilities, as well as have these reading groups and reading so diversely, which is something that I want to do in all these other avenues? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I think the issue is that one of the things that I learned when I entered management, I spent a lot of time reading books about leadership. Many of these books are written in America. And one thing that came very, very clear out of that was that almost without exception, I realized that many of the illustrious leaders were actually very avid readers. We all know about the 10 books that Bill Gates recommend. We have all learned that Elon Musk reads, I think, 2 books per week or something like that. You know, we all learn about Mark Zuckerberg's reading club, you know, and so on and so forth. So it became very, and also, you know, so many of these leaders are readers. And I often say that if you do not read, you should not lead. So reading is very much part of leading. You know, it gives you new perspectives. Certainly for me, it makes me connect with my staff and students in a much more intellectual way than I would otherwise connect with them. You know, so what I do, I read a book every month, and I'm excited about sharing the book with my staff and students, so that we can discuss what I've read. But in order for me to do that, I have to set up time to read. You know, whatever is important enough, you must have time that you can actually be able to set aside to read, to do. Thank you very much.
Prof, thank you. I think we could keep you here for the whole day. But Jeremiah, as the last question for the session.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Prof, for a very comprehensive and really thought-provoking presentation. Really, that says we need to take stock of the current developments within the higher education sector. Thank you very much for that. Prof, this then leads me to ask this question. Are our universities or institutions, through their staff complements, really do enough research development and innovation to sort of address and also contribute with possible solutions towards the socio-economic issues that we are experiencing? And I think this question really is dictated by the fact that if you look at in Africa, there are a lot of infrastructure deterioration, economic hub deficiencies, and also lack of, in some areas, some development. Whereas looking at Africa has a very rich history in terms of the resources. And really that make me think, and also with the challenges that we are having in terms of the education. That was really what made me to ask this question. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Look, I mean, the answer is yes and no. We all know that you know, our system of our university sector is highly differentiated in terms of resource envelopes. Some universities have more resources than others. So our task as leaders of our institution is that all our universities must actually be in a position to be able to do the very basis, the very basics of what universities should be able to do. This will mean that we need to deal with issues of infrastructure. We need to deal with issues of staff to student ratios and deal enough with that issue. We continually demand more from our staff without necessarily looking into how do we capacitate that. And we need to reposition our universities, not just as providers of education, but as important economic players in our economy, so that we can be able to attract more resources from the private sector. Thank you very much.
Prof. Marwala, I wonder if I could convince you to please respond to Sabello's question as the last. Okay. Sabello, do you want to ask the question? I promise you, Prof, we're not holding you to ransom.
I've typed it on the chat, but I was going to say that, you know, if you look at the current curriculum in the universities, they don't actually incorporate artificial intelligence or business science or anything of that form. Even when you move to postgraduate, you know, PhD, postdoc, we tend to narrow our fields. I mean, literally, you want to be the expert in one particular issue or whatever sphere that you want to specialize in. So, I mean, how do we bring those people in? Because I mean, for some of them, or even for myself, although I'm not that far away from postdoc, but you know, to learn new technologies, to learn computer science, I'm not sure if that's something that I would want to do. But so how do we then change that for the next generation? Because I suspect that's where we may be able to make that change.
Well, I think we need to introduce these subjects. I mean, at the University of Johannesburg now, I'm sure Kirti will talk more about this. Every student has to take artificial intelligence. It is a compulsory course for all the students. It's not, it's not going to teach you how to do. It's not going to teach you how to do complicated programming, but it is going to teach you about what this technology is about, what it does, and so on and so forth. So in addition to the Africa Insights module that everybody has to take, all our students have to take Introduction to Artificial Intelligence. They can't graduate without it, but they get a complimentary certificate that shows that they have actually done this. And I'm sure, Kirti, you can talk more about that. Thank you.
So, Prof. Marwala, on behalf of the FPP program, I'd like to thank you so much for your insights into higher education, how we locate ourselves within this very complex and turbulent environment, and how we as academics, as staff within the higher education environment, see ourselves as agents of change, that we ourselves do not become fossilized and unable to change because we are holding on to rigid notions. Prof. Marwala, each one of the FPP participants has received a signed copy of your book. And I suppose my challenge then is to re-invite you back for a book club discussion. I think that we're going to have to send them the second iteration of your books on leadership, which is of the books that have inspired you. Perhaps we will send that to them in 2022, and we will re-invite you to our session, and my FPP participants can indicate by reactions whether you want that, because I think that we will really be, and here we go. People want you back, Prof. Marwala. Thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you for sharing with us, and we look forward to continued engagements as this program falls under your leadership as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.